So while we're just sorting out the presentation, good morning. My name is Barry Nee. I'm from Care UK. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Care UK. We're a very quiet brand, Care UK, but we are the UK's biggest provider of health and social care outside the NHS. So we have about 130 care homes around the UK and lots of different NHS healthcare contracts. The ones that are most relevant to today are to do with 111. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. There's no other audience participation, don't worry, there's no interpretative dance I'm going to get you to do. I just want you to put your hands up. So hands up who's heard of 111, the non-emergency phone number. Okay, great. And hands up who's actually phoned 111. Great. So, actually most of you, so that's really good. So I won't go into any detail about what 111 is. I think you all hopefully know what it is. It's the non-emergency phone number that you phone for the NHS. We're the biggest provider of 111 services, so we provide 111 to about 20 million people in England. And we do about 4 million phone calls a year, clinical telephone calls between 111 and our out-of-hours GP services. So GPs that come and visit people outside the normal surgery opening hours. So we're running clinical telephony at a really big scale, probably the biggest scale in Europe. And we started to think a few years ago about what else we might do with that infrastructure that we've created and how we might use the clinical telephony call centres that we have to generate new ideas about how we might help to create new services and look after people in a different way. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So before I go much further, I'm going to talk to you about John's story. So John's not his real name. Hertfordshire is not the country he lived in. 91 years of age wasn't his real age, but everything else is a real story. When we started to think about this, I thought to myself, I need to go and talk to some people about this and get their input on it. And the first person I spoke to was, you guessed it, my kid's babysitter, right? So I probably need to explain that a little bit. So my kid's babysitter was a nursery nurse when they were small, who went back to university to do a nursing degree and is now a community nurse. So I sat down one evening just when we'd come back from being out and said, look, I'm about to drive you home. I've got this idea. I'd like to explain it to you. What do you think? And she thought about what I said to her and she listened and she said, okay, I'm going to tell you a story and I'm going to tell you the story that she told me. So she's a community nurse. She's looking after John, who's 91 years of age. John fought in the Korean War. He's a tough old guy. He's been living on his own for the last 15 years since his wife died. His son comes in the morning to get him out of bed and to get him his breakfast. And his daughter-in-law comes in every night to make sure he's okay and he's put down for the night and everything's fine. During the day, he's fairly independent. He makes his own lunch. He spends every afternoon in the local betting shop with all his pals, kind of betting on dog racing in the northeast of England and all sorts of stuff, but actually a very happy, fulfilled individual living a pretty full life for his age. The community nurse was in to see him twice a week just to weigh him and take his blood pressure, not because he had any really serious medical problems, just because he was frail and elderly and living on his own. He had all the right support mechanisms in place. His family were a fantastic family. One morning, his son came in to get him up. It was in January a few years ago, and gave him his breakfast. Inexplicably, John went to his pill boxes, which were all correctly laid out, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, AM, PM. Inexplicably, he took a PM tablet rather than an AM tablet. So 9 o'clock in the morning, he took a sleeping pill. He started to feel unwell, hadn't realised what he'd done probably, thought, oh, I might be sick, went into the bathroom, which is an unheated room, fell over, hit his head on the sink, and then lay there until his daughter-in-law found him 10 hours later, hypothermic. John was taken to hospital and didn't last until midnight, so he died that day. Now, that story has stayed at me because it made me really angry when I heard that story. Because even when that happened 3-4 years ago, there was no need for that type of outcome to happen to an individual like that. People don't need to end their lives in that way because the technology exists to stop that from happening. And you're going to hear from some amazing companies later on today who've got ideas to help ameliorate these types of situations and stop them from happening in the first place. But there is no reason why something like that should happen to somebody. And all of us in this room who've got an interest in this whole world and making sure people are safer at home and able to live independent lives, we shouldn't listen to stories like that and say, do you know what, we're okay with what we're doing today. The current status quo is good enough, because it isn't. We've got to push really hard, and we've got to use the talents that we've got, the energies that we've got, and the skill that we've got to make sure that we're creating services and we're thinking about ways in which we can do things differently to stop those kind of situations from happening. So if I talk a little bit about why hasn't technology fixed this problem already, right? So we've been talking about telehealth and telecare and tele-whatever for a very, very long time. Telehealth in the past has been very disease focused. So, if you look at the literature, people have run pilots of 50 diabetes sufferers in Portsmouth or wherever it happens to be. It's been very focused on a particular disease that somebody has. And quite often, multiple comorbidities don't even come into the process, because otherwise you have a Frankenstein's monster of a blood pressure cuff, a blood glucose monitor, a weighing scales, lots and lots of different types of things that people have to wear and remember to use, etc., to be able to do that. So it kind of struggles to take off. It's also been very device focused. It's been about building the best measurement tools. So how do you create a measurement tool that gives you the best ECG, or the measurement tool that gives you the best blood glucose monitor? And all the companies that create these things think about getting the device right and think about getting the measurement right. They don't necessarily think about getting the usability right, or the ability to use this thing, or actually the design right. So a lot of these things, and that's something that we feel really strongly about, a lot of these things are designed by younger people who are trying to solve what they see as a medical or a social care problem. So they come up with the kind of red and white, alarm button that you've got to wear around your neck, which is a badge of infirmity. It's saying to people, do you know what, you're a fall risk, so you've got to wear this kind of medicalized piece of equipment because you're a medical problem. Actually, that's completely wrong, and you need to think, and when we're designing these things, we need to think dignity first about how we're creating these things. One of the things that I've learned as I've spent the last kind of 6-7 years working around this industry and working with older people is there's no such thing as old people, right? There's just no such thing. It's a complete misconception. The diversity you'll get in a group of 90-year-olds is exactly the same as the diversity you'll get in a group of millennials. It's exactly the same. And actually most of those people in their 90s, as long as they're relatively fit and well, don't see themselves as old. So our marketing manager's 94-year-old granddad will not go to the local daycare centre, because guess what it's full of? Old people, right? So we need to leave those conceptions and misconceptions at the door when we're thinking about how we design these services and how we design these devices that we give to people. So what's the future? So the future is user-focused, device-enabled, but really importantly, service-empowered. So I'll talk a little bit about a triangle in a few minutes, but it's all very well having devices, it's all very well having technology, but you need to make sense of it. You need to close the loop for what that technology is telling you, and I'll come back to what that means in a few minutes. And it's all about the use case. Why is it we're doing this? What's the point of doing it? What's the why? And really importantly, we have to engineer simplicity, right? Some of the smartest things in the world and the most complicated devices in the world are the simplest things to use. And actually one of the hardest things to do is to take something complicated and make it simple. But that's our challenge. That's something that we must do. And the future needs to be missions built on stories. So when we have a bad day in the work that we're doing, we go back to that story that I talked about right at the start, because that's what drives us. That's our touchstone. I've already spoken to Sebastian this morning, who has an amazing story, and his mission story is a really great story as well. So if you get a chance to talk to him, have a listen to that. But it's about bringing back your mission to something that really matters to you and making sure that you're driving it from there. So if you're trying to get technology right, and I haven't got all the answers to this, so this is just my view and my opinion, there are some key questions that you need to make sure you understand. Are you really clear what problem you're trying to solve? Do you really understand the problem you're trying to fix? How many people have that problem? And how do you know? What's your evidence for the size and scale of that issue? does this problem keep people awake at night? So are people worried about this to the extent that they're kind of losing sleep over it? Is it a really serious thing for them? Can you solve all of the problem or just some of it? So quite often, technology companies will sit there and say, oh yeah, we can cover all the bases. Actually, you probably can't. You need to think about what bits can you cover and what bits can you not. Is there a service element that sits alongside your devices, and can you deliver it? Does it make sense for people? Can you actually be the person at the end of the phone that makes sense of a crisis that comes out of a device reading? Do you need to partner to solve this? And if so, can you find the right people to partner with? And are you clear how you'll get it to market? In the end, if you're trying to create something that you want to take into the marketplace, you need to be clear about how you're going to get it there. And have you got strong barriers to entry? What's going to stop somebody else having the same idea in the shower tomorrow morning, hopping out of the shower and going, wow, I'm going to go and do this because that's a great idea and there's very few barriers for me to do this. So if we go back to our story about John, who isn't John, what's the problem? So the problem is aging, it's frailty, it's dislocation. So a lot of people don't live around the corner from their mum and dad in the way that they might have done 50 years ago. We don't necessarily live in tight-knit communities where people look out for each other in the way that we maybe once did. The cost and quality of care is really important as well. Not everybody can afford to put their parents into a care home. Not everyone can afford to have people come in and look after their parents. And guilt is a big part of it as well, right? So the primary carers for a lot of people we're talking about are running busy lives, right? They're doing multiple jobs. They're slaves to their Blackberries and their iPhones and their work email. They might have kids of their own, etc. So there's a lot of pressures on the people who are, trying to find time in their busy lives to be carers as well for their older generations. How many people have this problem? Well, a lot, right? A lot of people. When I talk to people about what we're doing in this space, quite often, after about 20 minutes, people glaze over. And I've kind of come to the realization that actually they haven't stopped listening to me, or they're not interested, but they're thinking about their own parent, or they're thinking about their own grandparent, or their own uncle, or whoever it happens to be. And they're starting to personalize what it is I'm talking to them about and how it might be relevant to them. Does this problem keep people awake? Well, literally it does. Can we solve all of it? Well, we can't solve all of it, actually. So we can't necessarily be the people who come in and pick somebody off the floor when they've fallen over. That's not necessarily the bit that we can do. But we can find the fact that somebody's fallen over and get help to them, which is important. So we can't do the end-to-end thing, but we understand the bit that we can do, and we're clear about how that works. Can we provide a service? Well, we can. So we have 5 network call centres that are doing 4 million telephone calls a year. We can add another service into those call centres. Our call centres outside of the weekend are actually pretty quiet. So right now, kind of 10:30 on a Tuesday morning, we might have 30 or 40 111 calls happening for our population across England. So across the whole of England, there's maybe right now 200 or 300 111 calls live as we speak across the whole of England. We're maybe doing 50 at around this time in the morning. On the 26th of December 2 years ago, we had 975 calls, just us, going at the same time. So if you gross that up to England, that's probably about 3,500 to 4,000 calls live on 111 at that one point in time on the 26th of December. So we have an infrastructure that is pretty quiet now and can scale really, really, really big. But actually most of the time it's pretty quiet, it's underutilized. So all the lights are on, the aircon's on, the heating's on, the PCs are switched on. We don't necessarily have a call handler in front of a PC because we're not actually forecasting any calls to come in. But we can very quickly use that capacity that we've got to provide a service that allows us to kind of look after older people and frailer people in a new way, which I'll come on to in a second. So do we need a partner, and can we find the right partner? Well, we're not a technology company, right? We're a care delivery company. So, we're not a wearable device manufacturer. We're not a cloud-based algorithmic coders. That's not really what we do. So We can do a bit of that, and we've done some of it, but actually the key thing is that we stay within our own tram lines and concentrate on what we can do and partner with people who can help us to deliver those services. Are we clear about how we get it to market? Well, we think so. When, I'll talk about when in a bit, not just yet, but soon, hopefully. And do we have strong barriers to entry? Well, we think we do. For what we're going to talk about and show you, we think there are pretty strong barriers to entry. So we've built a solution around a triangle, and what I mean by a triangle is a very simple thing. I'm going to show you a video in a second. So we have a solution which uses a wearable device, so it's a kind of commercially available, go and buy it in Currys wearable device, which somebody wears on their wrist and actually doesn't single them out as a badge of infirmity. It just looks like a cool watch. And what it does behind the scenes is it sends a ton of data to the cloud where we look at that data and we understand what it's telling us, and where there are problems with that data. So if it looks like somebody's fallen over, or they're having some issues around heart rate variability, or high heart rates when they're at rest, or low heart rates when they're at rest, we can actually see that happening in real time, and we can take action. And we can phone them either straight through to the device on their wrist, through to their house phone. And actually, if somebody's unwell, when we start to have that conversation, we can say, okay, do you know what? Doesn't sound like you're very well. I'm going to take you through 111. And as you go through 111, those of you who have phoned it before, most of you probably got self-care advice actually when you're in, because most people do. But actually, when you go through 111, the person who's taking you through 111 can connect you through to your own GP surgery. They can book you an appointment in your own GP surgery for tomorrow. I mean, that's quite amazing, right? For most of us trying to get GP. So that's a big thing, right? So they can potentially, if it's out of hours, get you an out of hours doctor to your home that night, and they can action an ambulance. So if you need an ambulance, they can get an ambulance to you. So 111 is a gateway into those formal NHS services that are available to you. So what we feel we can do with the service that we're going to create is where somebody does have a problem, not only can we identify it and find it, probably even maybe earlier than they would have flagged it themselves, but we can potentially hook them into the NHS response that they need and that's most appropriate to them. So I've got a little video which I'm just going to show quickly. Hopefully this works. Just bear with me.
Golf on Mondays, lunch out on Wednesdays, gardening every Thursday, weather permitting. Busy lives are full of routines. The same goes for your health. From your heart rate to your sleeping patterns, your body has its own rhythms. And a sudden change to your routine could indicate something's not quite as it should be. Wouldn't it be nice to think that somebody else notices that too? You can discover what's normal for you by using WellWatch. It looks and feels just like a standard watch, yet it's anything but. Using the very latest technology, our team monitors your vital signs and daily activity. Over time, that information creates a picture of your body's rhythms. And should the watch detect something unusual, for example, an uncharacteristically high heartbeat or changes in your normal activity levels, the UK's leading provider of NHS 111 will be informed. If there's cause for concern, we'll be in touch. WellWatch also senses sudden movements, such as trips or falls. We can even summon help if you need it, be that from friends, family, or the emergency services. You can also call for help from your watch if you need to. And you'll be kept up to date with a weekly report based on what you've been up to. You can even decide to let your family see how you're getting on, giving them the gift of peace of mind. You've been looking after your health all these years. Why not let the experts keep an eye on it with you?
Great, thank you. So great, okay, so the technology works. That's always good, isn't it, when stuff like that happens. So hopefully it just gives you a bit of an overview of what it is we've been working on. So WellWatch is the name of the service that we want to bring to the market. And I talk about it as a service rather than a device, because it's not just about the thing on somebody's wrist, it's about the support that sits behind it. Oh, here we go.
Lunch out on
Let me
Wednesdays.
see if I can stop that.
Gardening every Thursday, weather permitting. Busy life.
Once is probably enough, I think. Okay, so a little bit of a summary then of, well, actually before I do that, let me talk a little bit more about WellWatch. So WellWatch it's something that we're hoping to launch early next year. So we're working as part of a tech accelerator called the Age Tech Accelerator, which is an EU-funded accelerator, which I'm reliably informed funding will continue for a little period of time beyond the end of the month, which is good. But we are hoping to run through a pilot early in 2020 and then look to take something into the marketplace later in 2020. So keep your eyes peeled on this. So, but as I say, it's something that we think we can uniquely bring that triangle together, if you like, kind of the data that gets collected down here, the intelligence that's generated from that data, but then closing the loop with the support piece at the bottom of the triangle, which is the bit that's really important, that actually makes sense of that entire end-to-end process for people. So hopefully I've got us back on track, actually, almost onto the agenda, which is good. So a quick summary. When you're setting out to, and it doesn't necessarily, I don't think this really applies even to just a tech solution, but when you're setting out to design a service for people, just remember those questions that I talked about earlier on and be really honest with yourself about what the answers to those things are. Because it's easy to kind of cod yourself and into a kind of false sense of security that I've got this brilliant idea and I know it's going to be amazing, etc. But actually, when you really sit down and start to think through the pitfalls and things that could go wrong, there are always lots of those, but it's, if you get to the end of that honest conversation with yourself and still think, do you know what, there's still something in this, then maybe you have something that's worth thinking about and taking forward. Focus on the technology and the service. That's key. So the technology on its own, there's a ton of great technical solutions out there, a ton of them. Go and Google wearable devices on Amazon, and my goodness, you'll find 500 different items. So there's no shortage of hardware, there's no shortage of tech, but the thing that takes that to the next level is the so what. What service can you put behind this that actually takes the information coming from those devices and does something with it? There's really no point in you having a wearable device that tells you you've got a variable heart rate or a very high heart rate, a very low heart rate, and nobody knows. Nobody can see that that's happening. It's just something, it's actually, I was talking to my wife about it recently, who's a dreadful hypochondriac, who she would tell you that if she was here. I've almost taken Google out of the house because every time I come home, it's like, oh my God, I think I've got this. She said, look, this wouldn't be for her because actually, any kind of wearable device where she can see her heart rate. She's like, by the way, the healthiest person I know, right? This is often the case. But any kind of information like that, it's not always that helpful. It depends on the individual who's doing it. But actually, if you know somebody else is looking at that behind the scenes and is making sure that actually the data that's coming through is okay and they're able to reassure you with a monthly call or whatever happens to be, saying, do you know what, you're doing great. Everything looks really fine. Your activity levels are good, your heart rate looks good, all of your kind of day-to-day routine looks great. This is all good. But actually, you have an opportunity to speak to, it might even be a GP who you can have a monthly conversation with. Just say, well, I'm a bit worried, I've got a pain in my leg, what do I do about that? Okay, here's what you need to do. Here's all the things that it probably aren't. There's probably not this, not this, not this, but actually maybe go and see your own GP and have a chat to them about it. So that reassurance and that peace of mind for the person who's actually using the service, but also for the people who are likely to buy this, which aren't the people who are going to use it, they're kids, peace of mind for kids who aren't living around the corner from people, maybe feel a bit guilty about the fact that they're not able to give the amount of input that they know they probably should be. I'm in that position myself. Don't be afraid to go back to square one. We've done that kind of snakes and ladders thing quite a few times actually over the last few years. We've done that. You learn a lot along the way when you do that, and actually sometimes it's only once you've been out of that kind of despair curve that you've kind of climbed back up again that you realise what you learned when you did do that. and only ignore the boss twice. So I've ignored my boss twice when he told me to stop, and last time he said don't do that again. So you know, it's kind of linked to the previous one around going back to square one. As you go through these things and as you try and design something that's new and hasn't been done before, despite how well you answer those questions and how honestly you answer those questions, you're going to hit brick walls that you didn't expect. And they might not even be anything to do with you. They might be to do with people who are helping you, supplying you, working with you. It might be completely outside your control. You just got to pick yourself up and run at it again. And actually when people are saying to you, look, really, should you be doing this? Just for a couple of times ignore them, actually. And then when they sit you down for the third time, it's probably at that point you probably got to listen. So, and I think that was it. I've got a couple